By the end of this video, this project is going to look completely different, if I do this right. In a recent live stream, I did this planning session, which I thought would just be kind of chill and low-key. However, the people at the stream had a different idea. They thought, let's give Abra some new exciting ideas for this project so she can't sleep at night because all she can do is think about how these ideas are going to look once they're implemented into the project. That was sarcasm, if you didn't detect it, because I'm absolutely so excited that they gave me these new ideas because I've been kind of stagnant on this project for a while, and this next year is going to be the year that I finish it up, and getting new, fresh, exciting ideas like the ones I got in that live stream are the way I'm going to get to the finish line. So one thing my creative brain likes to do is to absorb so many ideas that I don't know where to start. So this is where cardboard comes in. Yep, this stuff. I'm going to spend this video making cardboard mock-ups of all of those individual ideas. There was an idea for a crow's nest, there was an idea for a figurehead, both of these things kind of communicating back to the original 17th century ship idea, which was the whole start of this project. And by making the simple cardboard mock-up replicas, whatever you want to call them, I can move them all around the project, cut them up, repurpose them, do all sorts of different things until I'm happy with the final look of how the captain's quarters is going to end up. I don't even know what that looks like at this point. So I hope you'll come with me on this creative cardboard journey as we kind of take this rectangular prism of a project and go up and out and over and sideways and just add so many new things. So let's get started. I headed straight over to my pile of recyclables that I've been saving for a rainy day. I guess today is that rainy day. I just grabbed all sorts of things with nothing really specific in mind. I'm using hot glue to put everything together pretty quickly. Because these are all just going to be placeholders, I don't have to worry about the details too much. One of the ideas from the live stream was to add a crow's nest somewhere into the project. There were many suggestions for how to use the crow's nest, but for now I'm just going to make a generic crow's nest so I can move it around the project to really decide what I want it to be. I looked up some references online, and crow's nests seem to go from basically just a plank that you can stand on to full-on walled off areas. All I want to do right now is make something that's tall enough for the captain to stand in, and because my tape roll that I used was not even close to being big enough, I cut it on one side, extended it, and then I made an even more extended railing that goes around the outside. And I think this gives it that crow's nest look that we all kind of imagine when we think of an old ship. I wanted to also put it up on a pole, so I used my craft blade to cut through the center, and I'm using this dowel. However, I'm not going to be gluing it in because this is a perfectly good wood dowel and I don't want it to be part of the sample forever. I also checked to make sure my robots, or aka my Pokemon, worked well in case I decide to put one inside the crow's nest, wherever it ends up. Another idea that was thrown out was to have the old figurehead of the ship somewhere else inside the cargo bay, which is what I'm building when it comes to the spaceship part. So I'm using a Monster High doll to create an outline that is 2 times the size of a person in dollhouse scale, because Barbie scale or Monster High scale is 1/6 and dollhouse scale is 1/12. After I have a cardboard cutout, I'm going to bulk it out with a little bit of foil just so I have a 3D effect. This way, as I move it around and try to figure out the best spot for it, I have something that's about the right shape. I looked up several references for real-life figureheads. There's such a variety out there, and I still don't know what my figurehead is going to look like. I have quite a bit to choose from within the lore of the captain and the ship, so I'm going to hold off on that decision for now, but I have a placeholder to move around and try to figure out. Other things I'm going to be making are just very simple beams that will hold up some platforms, because I still need to figure out stairs and platforms and ramps that go all around the project. Now that I have a few things built, I can really start playing around, and this is where the sketching idea is coming in full force because I'm moving things around, not really sure where their final placement is going to be. I decided to go ahead and put the crow's nest towards the front of the project. I really liked that it was extending out of that front viewing wall, and I built a temporary floor just to see if I liked how it looked in this space. Because I liked it enough, I went ahead and glued the crow's nest to the very end of the floor. I can always tear it off if I decide to move it later. I'm not going to be gluing the floor in place. I'm just going to use some 1, 2, 3 blocks to hold it there. And I think I want to start by putting the figurehead in the corner, kind of looking out over everything that's happened, maybe even looking out over protecting the original 17th century portion of the project. I know this looks a little painful, but this was the best way I could think to temporarily hold the figurehead in place. There will be other ways that the figurehead will be held up in the future. And finally, I used a rectangle of cardboard to mark out where a door would go. Breaking news, Mr. Technology has brought me some aluminum. Now, I was pretty sure this whole video was going to be cardboard, but I think we're going to be adding, for the first time in Bentley House Minis history, some metal, some actual metal, into our project building. I'm really not quite sure what this stuff is called, so I'll put it on the screen in case you're interested in trying some of this out for yourself. Mr. Technology already had it in the garage because he has built a few things with it and we had some scraps. So I'm still using scraps, technically, for this build. He said they're fairly easy to put together with these connector pieces, so I'm gonna give it a shot and see if I can build something for the side of the captain's quarters. He brought me these aluminum pieces because he realized I was printing I-beams on the 3D printer and asked if I'd be willing to try them out, or just asked if they would be helpful. So let's give it a go. I'm going to be building something that looks like scaffolding on the side of the project, and this was always the plan, but it was never the plan to build it from metal. I did struggle a little bit with getting the bolts and the connectors in place, and this is because these pieces had been sitting nearby when some fireproofing spray had been sprayed, so they got a little bit messy, and actually I didn't really want to clean them off because I thought they'd be some good aging for the project. But this did make the sliding of the bolts a little bit more difficult. After I had gotten together a pretty basic structure, I decided to test it next to the captain's quarters. And I'm really excited about how it looks. It's definitely a contrast to the wood interiors on the 17th century part of the ship, and it's going to be a fantastic place for me to rest these truss pieces that I had made in a previous video. So now I'm very excited about this aluminum, and I'm going to create another piece for this other side of the project. And I'm going to have to be careful to make sure that I get all of these vertical beams in areas that don't have a project underneath them. I sketched out the plan on the cardboard, but then I redrew it on some graph paper and marked out how many pieces of each length I needed so we could cut the aluminum we had left very carefully. Here's a little construction montage for you. It goes together pretty easy once I have the pieces cut, and I did my best to follow my drawn map to make sure each piece ended up where it needed to be. This goes together fairly quickly, and I will show you the process of how these pieces go together in a moment. But I was so excited at this point because I realized how much longer this would take if I was having to make all of these beams myself and paint them to look like metal. Then I realized I didn't follow my map quite right, and I got one of the pieces mixed up, so I had to take it back apart. But while I'm fixing that, I'm going to show you how to use these pieces. So this is the little nut, I'm going to say. I'm not quite sure the technical term, but it slides into the channel inside of this piece. Then you can use the 90-degree connector and make sure you can see the nut inside of there. Use the bolt that goes into the nut, put it on the outside of the connector, and use this special little shaped screwdriver, I'm not quite sure what kind it is, and screw it into place so that the connector holds tight. Then you can do the same thing, making sure that this piece is connected to your previous one. And this is how fast it goes together. I'm not going to say it wasn't struggle-free, especially when I got to the more complicated shape and I was trying to make sure that the little nuts didn't roll around all over the place, but I did eventually get it together a lot faster than I would have if I was hand making all of these structural beams. I slid it into place next to the captain's quarters and above the changing room and the plant room, and I was very happy with the look. I also plan to use these as supports to hold up my triangle trusses across the top of the captain's quarters, which will eventually hold some lighting. I did not think I would be creating the actual floors in this video. I thought I was just going to be making a mock-up. However, since I have the frames here ready to go, might as well start working on the floors. Are you done? I'm not sure what this is called, but I know it's used for cross stitch and maybe some other crafts. You can find them at the craft store in the sewing section, and this is going to be the grate that goes on top of my walkways. And I really like this. I think it's going to look really industrial and look like a spaceship walkway. Now, that means you're going to be able to see these things underneath, and if you'll notice, I still haven't finished this side of this part of the project, and now that I'm going to be showing the back of this piece, I have a lot more of this project that I need to cover up because a lot of this is pink foam board. So I'm going to turn this around so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is the back of the project. It's that Pink Panther foam stuff, and I think this side is going to be visible. In fact, I'm going to put some stairs along here so it looks like more of a busy area. You're also going to see the back of this project. So I ordered some aluminum and copper looking vinyl to cover up those areas so this task is not as daunting. Obviously that adds a little bit more cost than just doing paint and doing greebles everywhere, but I'm just not inspired to do this part of the project, so I was looking for something to make this step a little bit easier. So all that being said, I am going to work on these walkways now. I need to kind of focus because I thought this video was going to be one thing and now it's another thing, and I'm kind of finding myself all over the place. So walkways are next. I found these plastic sheets to be very easy to cut and also very easy to measure because they're a grid, and so if you're doing something that's on a 90-degree angle, you could just count how many squares you needed to cut out and then cut them away from the project and not worry that you were going to do something that wasn't at a 90-degree angle. So that worked out really, really well. I went ahead and covered all the areas that I knew was going to need flooring with the plastic sheets. They are not super strong, so I am going to have to put something underneath them because I don't want them to droop over time. I mentioned that I was going to need some stairs, actually a lot of stairs, and so I decided to laser cut these to make this process a little easier on myself because I'm going to need so many. I'm using the plastic grating again to create the steps themselves, and this is going to be glued on top of a small rectangle of mat board that was laser cut so that it has a little bit more support. In order to attach these two sides of the staircases, I'm using a wood dowel to go through the holes that I designed into the staircase. This is going to help me keep these two pieces together as I'm adding on each individual stair. This was a little bit fiddly, but that is because when it comes to a metal industrial staircase, they do look a little bit fiddly, which is part of their character. So I was okay with making everything look really thin and kind of precarious. Once I had all the steps made, it was pretty easy to glue them in place on top of their supports. Now, while this was easy to construct, it was very time consuming, so I'm going to be doing the rest of the staircases off camera. This is the final result, and I do plan to spray them with a silver paint, so hopefully they will look like metal like everything else does. Along with the stairs that are going to be on the back of the project, I am going to need some in the front so that this scaffolding is accessible to those that need to do repairs on the outside of the 17th century portion. I'm not quite sure yet how I'm going to put the stairs on the outside, but I am liking how they look together. I'm also going to need stairs down to the doorway that goes into the top floor. While I was working on the stairs, the vinyl that I ordered came in the mail. I got one silver and one copper. They have 10 sheets each. I decided to do a test on some foam to see how it looked if I used a ball stylus to put in some designs so I don't have just a flat sheet of metal. And I think it ended up looking okay. And also I felt like the adhesive worked really well. That's what the reviews said. So I'm hoping this is something that will last over several years. But only time will tell. The first room I'm going to work on is the changing room. So I'm going to remove all the miniatures from inside, and what you're going to see the most is the top of the changing room. This was leftover mat board from cutting out all of the stair steps, so I'm going to glue that on top of the roof so I don't just have a flat sheet of metal. I think this will give it more visual interest. I haven't done much with this vinyl, really just my test piece, so I'm going in pretty confident, hoping that this will work out. The first difficult task was to remove the backing from the vinyl itself. Eventually I got it, and then I started from the very front edge of the roof and started working my way back. This was pretty sticky, but I found I could reposition it for the most part. I probably wouldn't want to stick the whole thing down and then really apply pressure and then try to remove it, but I did feel like I had a little bit of wiggle room as I worked with it. So I started from the front and started pressing down all of the places that I was happy with. I did come to find that if you had any single imperfection in the surface you are adding it to, the vinyl will reveal that big time. I tried to loosely drape it over the top of my grid, and then I started pressing it down towards the back of the room. Once I was happy with the positioning, I could go back with a ball stylus and really push down the areas that were inside of the grid. I couldn't get right into the corners, but I do like the effect. I think it kind of looks like my microwave a little bit, but I think that'll work for a spaceship. Now the sides don't look great, but you're not going to see the sides. Mostly you're going to see the top. So I also need to cover this little back area. Hopefully it'll look like some kind of venting system and no one will really take notice because it's covered in silver like the rest of the room. All of this is just going to take a little bit of time and patience, but it's way less time than it would have taken if I was doing this by hand and painting the whole thing. Now I can work on the plant room, which is a little bit rougher than the construction of the changing room. So I'm going to have to clean up the edges because, like I said, the vinyl will show everything. I know it's not going to be perfect, and in fact this one I cut a hole in because there's a bit of wire that comes up through the plant room that's holding some of the tubes in place, and I think that just totally threw me off because this gets really wrinkly along the way. So I did want to show it can be a little frustrating. There is a little bit of give in the fact that it's stretchy, so there were some of the wrinkles I was able to push out, but some of them I really just made permanent. So it's a learning process to use this stuff, but I think it came out so good, and it's giving me a lot of ideas for the Beetlejuice appliances that need to go in the kitchen because they need to be really flat and shiny and modern looking, and I wasn't quite sure how to make that happen with paint, so I think the vinyl might be the way to go. I only needed to do 3 sides of this box because that's all you will see, but doing the back side really showed me how horrible it can look if you are working on top of a messed up piece of foam board, which is good to know because I am about to work on a really messed up piece of foam board. And for these vent pieces, I've just decided to paint them, and eventually I'll find some kind of greebly to go on this top area. Speaking of foam board that's all messed up, here's the side of my project that I've been avoiding for a while now. I used one layer of foam board here, so it did get a little bit wrinkly over time of me just moving it around, and I had used some joint compound to make the seams a little bit less bumpy. However, the joint compound is very bumpy, so I had to sand that down, and I'm just using a wet paper towel to get up all the dust. What I've decided to do to cover up the areas that have wrinkles is to use some other materials and put them on kind of like big sheets of metal. I'm going to be using some chipboard or cereal box material and some cardstock and even some mat board, and I can just do this randomly because that's what I've done on other parts of the spaceship. It makes it look as though different scraps of metal have been used to keep this thing together over the years. I did find some laser cut scraps that I put on the side, and once I was happy with the look, I decided to cover everything in that metallic vinyl. Because this side is so complicated in its shape and how many things are going on, I'm using smaller pieces. My plan is to cover the majority of the space with the vinyl and then go over the edges with some mat board and glue to make sure that the edges of the vinyl will stay down over the years. Just like I did on top of the changing room, I'm laying down the vinyl over the laser cut pieces and using a ball stylus to push in the edges. This is going to make it look like some formed metal on the side. I did push the vinyl into these little tiny holes, but later on you will see that they popped back out. This was definitely a learning process. I wanted to mix both the silver and the copper vinyl to see how it looked. I had done this with just using paint on the other side of the project, so that's why I'm doing it here on this side. As I was working, I did come across this panel that I created in a previous live stream, and I do think it will look good on the side here somewhere. I may have to add some more metallic paint to it, but I think it'll look good like there's some kind of control panel on the side of this 17th century portion. I'm now starting to add some mat board strips to cover up the edges, and as I'm doing that, I am sanding the vinyl so that the glue has something to hold onto. I'm using Fabrifix glue for this process, and I did find that it held on really well to the vinyl, and I'm not worried about it coming off anytime soon. After that was done, I could go around the edges, making these individual metal panels, just like I have done previously. If you want to see that video, I'll put it in the description box below. The back of this piece was quite a bit more messy because I never thought anyone would see it. But now that I think you will see part of it through the back of the project, I am going to have to address this as well. I'm using some cardstock to go over the joint compound seam because it was a little bit more extreme than the seam on the side of the project, and it's okay if it looks a little bit warped. Sheet metal can bend as well. And then I'm using some larger panels to cover up more of those wrinkles. I thought I was being really smart in this part of the process. I was going to use a really large piece of this vinyl to cover up a large area on the back. So I was just going to pull the paper a bit at a time. However, it didn't quite go as planned, and this is going to be a little bit painful to watch, especially if you're someone who works with vinyl quite a bit. You've been warned. I got it stuck on some tools that were sitting on my table. I did not clear my workspace, and I should have gone a lot slower, making sure that the top part was well adhered and flattened before I removed the paper on the bottom. So what I got was a wrinkly mess, and when I tried to pull it up to reposition it, it started pulling off the paper panels that I had glued on previously underneath. So I decided to try my best to just smooth it out as much as I could, and I was starting to plan maybe there's going to be some crates in front of this piece. I did end up getting it fairly flat, and mostly the wrinkles are at the very bottom or in the very bottom right corner. So I do think it won't be too bad of a thing to hide, or it's just going to be one of those things that I know is there and not too many people notice. I was much more successful on the other side of the back panel, and this time I went a lot slower, making sure that things were flattened before I removed the backing paper. So, as I said, this is a learning process. It's probably not something you want to learn as you're working on a final project that you've put a lot of time into, but this is just kind of how I do things, and it is what it is. So as you can see, I'm starting to figure it out and getting a bit more confident in my vinyl placement. But of course, if you have any suggestions on how that could be easier, let me know in the comments. After all the vinyl was laid down and I had gone around all of the edges with some cardstock, I was able to paint the cardstock with a layer of black Mod Podge. This is just a mixture of Mod Podge and black paint. It gives me a really nice base to start putting some metallic finishes on top of it. This was a lot of detail painting and took quite a bit of time, but thankfully it was pretty easy to remove from the surface of the vinyl if I overpainted too much. I Mod Podged and then I added fake rivets by using some diamond painting beads late into the night, and then the next morning I got up and started to do the metallic paint over the top. Just like I did previously, this is going to be a mixture of silver paint and a copper tone paint to give it a little bit of interest. It's the next day. I just spent a lot of time gluing on tiny little rivets because that's something I did originally on the other side of this piece, so I have to continue it. Oh joy! I know in the end I'll be thankful that I took all of that time, but for now I feel like I'm just done working on this, which is part of the reason I purchased the vinyl. So it did cover up a lot of the space and I didn't have to paint those areas. It's still looking a little rough. I do need to age it and add some rust spots. So I'm still thinking I will like this in the end. It's getting better each step I take, but each step is just taking a long time. One thing I have learned about the vinyl is that the little areas where I pushed it into the laser cut scraps are not staying completely. So this works best up here, this example. This is cardstock underneath this vinyl, and because it's very thin, I think it's doing the best job holding its shape. This underneath here is, I think it's chipboard or cereal box material, and it is not holding its shape so well, so I keep having to push in these little squares and they keep popping out. So that's kind of unfortunate. It's already pretty glued on there. I don't think it's coming off, but it's not going to be super visible. It's not a huge part of the project, so it's just one of those learning things. But if you did want to try this, I wanted to let you know what seemed to be working the best. I am going to speed through the aging process because you've seen me do it in several videos over this type of greebling, and that way we can get straight to seeing what this looks like in place. At this point, everything had been pulled out of the project. I was able to dust this back piece a little bit, and I was finally able to start putting things back in place and seeing how ultimately it's all going to look next to each other. Because now I actually have the main part of the captain's quarters metallic on the outside, which before you could tell that it was paper and foam board. So this is an exciting part of the process for me, at least. While I had been working on the vinyl bits on camera, off camera I had been constructing many sets of stairs, and I also went ahead and spray painted all of these pieces with a silver galvanized spray paint so that they had more of an industrial look before I even put them into the project. Of course, these need to be aged quite a bit. They are looking a little bit too shiny and new, but I was really excited to get them in place and start to get an idea of what this might look like in the future. You may notice I didn't do the best job of evenly coating the floors, but I kind of liked how that looked, so I left it because I wanted it to look as though there were different parts of the floor that had worn more than others. The aluminum scaffolding that I had made for either side of the project is going to do a lot to hold up the rafters at the very top. The rafters are going to hold the lights, so those are very important. I also built the stairs. I'm using some 1-2-3 blocks and masking tape to hold them in place because this is not the permanent place setting for them, but I wanted to get them in there just so you could start to get an idea of how this might look in the end. and the stairs that are going down to the door into the captain's quarters area are going to have to be cut in half, but again, I just wanted to place them in so you could get the effect of all of that metal and industrialness that's starting to go on within this project. I think it's a great contrast with the warm wood interiors of the original 17th century portion of the project. And of course, I had to give you a little glimpse of that copper vinyl I worked so hard on through the back. I feel like I did accomplish my original goal that this project was going to look completely different by the end of this video. Now, I didn't accomplish that with cardboard. I accomplished that with more metal than I had ever imagined initially. However, I still am going to be playing around with these pieces and trying to find the best location for each one. I was not able to work on the back of this project like I wanted to, but I am going to be doing that hopefully in the next video because I think that will really add an interesting side to the captain's quarters, and because it's so flat, I might be able to use it to add some information to the story. Speaking of the story, there was a box that arrived recently for the captain that contained some new characters that totally fit in with everything that's going on with this spaceship. So I'm going to share that with you now. I had to change my earrings because it's mail time. Okay. I've had a few things come in for the captain's quarters. I think I pretty much have everything I need. At one point I was collecting books, but I'm not really collecting books anymore. However, I want to make sure and say thank you when something does come in, and I just try my best to be able to use it if possible. If something is not able to be used in the project it was sent in for, I save it into my mini stash and just hope that I can use it somewhere else a little bit later. So I just wanted to say that in case you were wondering what's going on. These are just people who wanted to send me something out of their own creativity or had something in their stash that they thought would work for the captain's quarters. Rob sent me some greeblies, so these are like little extra bits off of kit parts. I think these are going to be great on the back of the interior part of the captain's quarters to make it look like there's all sorts of pipes and things happening behind the scenes. So I'm excited to use these. Michaelina, who created the captain, sent in these little brass miniatures. This one is a compass and has a really cool stand on it. And this is more of like a ship's wheel shape, and it has a compass within it. So both of these would be really cool to use in the project some way. In this package, Sarah had sent me a house for the Beetlejuice project. At the same time, she had sent some books for the captain's shelves. So I had already shown the Beetlejuice house in a previous Beetlejuice video. So now I just wanted to make sure and show the books that she made as well. And this box has multiple things in it, so I'm going to clear off the table so I can pull them out one at a time. This box is from Matthew Hackley, who has a background in toy customization and theater set design. Matthew created some figures for the captain's quarters with the captain's quarters story in mind. So I'm going to pull those out one at a time and read you the background of each character. Specifically, these are robots. This is the SVR unit. The SVR unit is a service robot that maintains the other robots on ships and settlements. These state-of-the-art robots use anti-gravitational technology to maneuver around their environments. This allows them to reach particularly difficult areas for maintenance. These units are extremely versatile and can be customized for several tasks. Some SVR units can even serve as medics during emergencies. So I think this SVR unit will be very helpful to one of the robots I previously created for this project. This is RBBT 700, aka Ribbit. The Ribbit is a service robot tasked with agrarian work. This small unit is ideal for taking care of vegetation aboard spaceships or on outer colonies. Along with hydration duties, this little bot excels at eliminating unwanted pests. This feature is especially important on vessels relying on hydroponic vegetation for sustenance. So we'll just have to make sure that he's programmed to know that the captain's cat is not a pest. This is the MKE robot, or Monkey Bot. The MKE model is designed for various tasks. Being both agile and quick, this robot is especially suitable for random and urgent jobs aboard space freighters and frigates. Its versatile frame allows the MKE unit to maneuver through ductwork corridors with ease. This makes the bot a great choice for errand work aboard space-faring vehicles. And if you thought those robots were amazing, we are now to my favorite robot. This is the GVS Mark II, or Jeeves. The GVS is a reliable service robot suited for formal tasks. Designed for protocol and decorum, this bot develops close interactions with its user. Usually serving in butler and concierge roles, the GVS model excels at detailed-oriented work. The unit serving aboard your vessel has many years of dedicated service under various captains. Though looking somewhat refined, the GVS has defense and combat capabilities and can readily defend its ship from danger. While faithfully serving the previous captain, Jeeves fought off a sortie of space pirates. The resulting conflict cost the unit its arm. And there is a little destroyed arm that came along with Jeeves. I'm so excited about these robots. I'm going to go ahead and put them in their places so you can see my idea of where each might go. Of course, I need to put Ribbit straight into the plant room. He's got a lot of watering to do in there. And the SVR unit is making an acquaintance with the robot I made that's currently sitting in the junk pile. Jeeves, who is my absolute favorite, is going to be helping with some navigation, and if he seems familiar to you, he did to me as well. Hi! And I can't think of a more perfect spot for MonkeyBot than up in the rafters, making sure that the captain's lights are always working. Thank you so much to everyone who has sent something in, whether you sent it in at the beginning of this project or you sent it in just now. I appreciate it so much, and really it does feed my creativity and get me excited about things, especially when I'm feeling a little bit stagnant on my story ideas. These new ideas coming in from other creators really gets me pumped to just keep going. Also, really quick, I found my paint markers, so we have some success to mark on the board right here. I'm going to add some to Beetlejuice because I worked on the base right before Christmas, and I'm going to add some to the captain's quarters because I feel like I made a pretty large step forward in the process today. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and going on the wild ride that was this video, whereas I didn't even know what was going on most of the time. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Why is it so echoey? Echo, echo. Oh, sorry. Got distracted by an email. So one thing my creative Brian, thank you for being so creative and helping me today. Probably should turn the camera off. I did not mean to hit record. Strings of glue everywhere, everywhere I go. You're so short they can't even see your ears. Paw, do you saw your paw?